All right. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great event on tap. I am very excited about this webinar. But before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of it, you will have the opportunity to access it later on demand. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar. We also will be taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for any of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your interface there and submit your questions under the question Q&A tab, and we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. We also have a couple polling questions during today's webinar, so please be on the lookout for them. They will pop up on your screen adjacent to the slides, I believe it is, on your interface. And hopefully we can get as many people as possible engaged with those. And then finally, at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is how 2020's top 5 attacks reveal the coming cyber threats in 2021. Our speakers today are James R. Slaby, who is the Director of Cyber Protection at Acronis, Candid Wüest, who is the VP of Cyber Protection Research at Acronis, and JD Parham, who is the Enterprise Solutions Architect at Acronis. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining me today. I am so excited about this webinar. I'm so happy to have you guys here.
Charlene, thank you so much for that very warm welcome, and to Security Boulevard for hosting us. As Charlene mentioned, I'm James Slaby. I'm the Director of Cyber Protection at Acronis. That is effectively a product role. Sometimes I present at these webinars, especially when they're around cybersecurity issues. Today I've got it easy. I'm just doing a little bit of Masters of Ceremony kind of event. But you can find things that I've written on behalf of Acronis on security topics, like my recent piece on assessing your software vendors for tech supply chain risk. You're probably aware of some recent software supply chain attacks in the news, and so that's something we really worry about at Acronis, and I put together a little piece to help you figure out how you can vet your software vendors to make sure they're doing everything they can protect you against them becoming a source of malware that can be distributed into your organization. Before we get into our packed agenda here, I wanted to run a quick poll question for you. I think it'll be interesting to find out what kind of threats you've been primarily dealing with over the past year or so, and compare that with some of the issues that my Director of Cyber Protection Research, who's going to be our first speaker today, has been looking at from a very global perspective, gathering intelligence from our global network of cyber protection operations centers. So if you can give us a quick answer there to that, we'll leave that poll up for a minute, and I'll take the opportunity here to introduce some of our speakers. So Charlie mentioned Candid Wüest is up first. He's the VP of Cyber Protection Research at Acronis. Candid is kind of a globally recognized maven in the business. He ran research on cyber threats for Symantec for 16 years before Acronis was lucky enough to snag him, was it a year and a half ago now, Candid? But you've probably read his research, seen him quoted in the tech and specifically the security press, maybe caught him as a main stage speaker at one of the big cybersecurity shows like RSA and Area 41. He's got a side gig advising the Swiss government on cybersecurity issues. He's actually based near our global headquarters in Switzerland. So just a super impressive guy to know in this field, someone I learn from every day. After Candid goes on, you're going to hear from John Parham, goes by JD, Enterprise Solutions Architect at Acronis, which he's been doing for nearly 9 years. If you need someone to really help you master designing, installing, managing, and optimizing the use of your Acronis technology. JD is your guy, and he's going to give a very brief tour of some of the answers that we've got for you to some of the problems that we're raising today. Got a couple of really smart guys manning the Q&A. They're going to try to answer some of your questions directly. We're also going to have a Q&A at the end, so we hope you'll stick around for that, as well as some complimentary resources we're going to distribute, as well as the Amazon cards that Security Boulevard's been kind enough to offer here. Dan Padilla is one of our guys on the Q&A line. He's been part of the Acronis account management team for 3.5 years. Derek Schell is also with him. He's been around a little bit longer. I think he only joined Acronis last year, but he's got over a dozen years of tech sales experience. So a couple of smart guys to help you out with your questions. Keep them coming. Use the Q&A interface, please, not the chat interface. All right, so just to quickly go through the agenda, Candid's going to come on first and talk about the big threats that he and his research team saw throughout last year and what that means going into 2021. We all know that this is an environment that just keeps evolving dynamically. It's been a big shift from us purely having to worry about cyber criminals now to have to worry about state actors in the coming year. Their fingerprints are all over everything. After that, he's going to hand over to JD, who is going to spend maybe 10 minutes on a kind of a whirlwind tour of Acronis Cyber Protect, which is how we help businesses, specifically largely through the help of our managed service provider partners, to address those that set of threats. Candid will come back on for a few minutes to talk about how the external world, whose job it is to assess tech vendors, sees Acronis. So I'm talking about industry researchers and independent test labs. Then I'll come back on and we'll get to any of your questions live on air that we didn't manage to get to in the Q&A interface. With that, I'm going to hand the podium over to Candid to talk about last year's threats and what they mean for the coming year's threats. Over to you, Candid.
Thank you, James. And also welcome from my side to everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. So it's definitely my pleasure to talk about all those nasty things that we have seen in cyberspace last year. And I want to give you a few advices on how to stay away from them as well. And as James already mentioned, I have the, let's say, interesting job, at least I like it, that I'm actually allowed to execute all those strange, suspicious-looking attachments, opening them up without getting any blames from the IT department, because, of course, we're not doing it on the production side, but we're analyzing what's happening there. And yes, if we look back at 2020, there have been many, many attacks happening, right? I mean, not any week goes by without any big attack happening. You probably heard about the SolarWinds attack, which made huge news in the US because it was a classical supply chain attack that we have seen. We'll talk about those in a bit as well, which managed to infect many government agencies, security companies, and other high targets, which of course means that, yes, they were well protected, but not well enough. So the attackers managed to get in. But in some other cases, it's just a quote unquote simple ransomware that can already bring the companies down. Just this week, we've seen 2 energy providers in Brazil being targeted by ransomware attackers, and part of their network has been brought down. So there are even real life consequences that you see now. You might have heard the news, I think it was yesterday in Florida, there was a water kind of treatment facilities for drinking water, which unfortunately was taken over by some attacker as well. And probably they didn't really know what they were doing, but they managed to change some of the chemicals, which would have led to poisonous water if it wouldn't have been stopped by the admin, who actually saw that the mouse pointer was moving while he was not moving his mouse on his own. So things like this can definitely happen. We also saw the huge attack against Twitter last year, where through social engineering and insider attacks, someone managed to actually tweet some messages for some high value accounts like, of course, from Obama or from Elon Musk, pushing some Bitcoin scam. Now, Bitcoin has actually been in the message from Elon Musk as well, but this time it's not a scam. This time it's from him. But it's hard to distinguish, right, if it comes from the original message. So I brought down 5 of the kind of type of attacks that we see over and over again last year, and then I will bring a few predictions of what we expect for this year to happen moving forward. So malicious emails are, of course, still attack vector number 1. There's about 80% of all the attacks involve some kind of malicious email. Very often it's a malicious attachment coming in, so classical Word attachment, and if you open it, it has that yellow bar telling you, hey, you need to activate some content to fully enjoy the attachment. But of course, fully enjoy will only be the thing that the attacker will do, because once you click on that button, a malicious script in the background, Visual Basic or a PowerShell script, will start downloading further malware and compromise your machine. To make our life a little harder, we see that very often they come as password-protected zip files or even a CAPTCHA, so that it's not so easy to automatically actually extract it and scan it with some, let's say, backend scanner on the email server. Sometimes it's also just a link to some Azure, Google Cloud, or Amazon Cloud, because that's a trusted link, right? We're kind of used to go to OneDrive or Google to download files. It's encrypted, but the content that you're actually downloaded might be malicious. And of course, they're also trying to make it very realistic. So Emotet, which was one of the biggest email threat last year, till luckily now it was actually taken down by law enforcement about a month ago. But they also implied that sometimes when they compromise a machine, they go through all the emails in your inbox, and then they just reply to some of those messages. So your friends will receive an email from your hijacked account saying, hey, by the way, I found a link, or I found some PDF which might be of interest to you. So it's very convincing, and a lot of people, of course, fell for those. We also see more and more phishing attacks where either it's a package delivery. I'll get about 3 of those emails every day. Although, I mean, yes, I do order lots during the lockdown and the pandemic, but not that much. So I know a lot of those are fake. They just try to get your credit card, your passwords, your email details, and so on. We also saw more and more of the OAuth authentication phishing going on. So here, it's often targeting Office 365, but they're not just asking you for your password, which a classical phishing website would do. They pose as something like a OneDrive application, and then it says, hey, this application needs some permission to access your account. And if you click on, yes, this application can read and write my emails, you basically giving full access to the attacker. So they don't need your password. They now have an authentication token that they can use to send email in your name, to go through all your past emails, searching for some passwords, some juicy information, and then blackmail you with it. And of course, we also see CEO fraud, where if it's in an organization, someone will try to mimic an email from the CFO, the financial officer, saying, hey, we need to pay this invoice immediately because it's already beginning of the month. It should have been paid in January. Please submit it. But the bank account is, of course, that of the attacker. We also saw that sometimes they will switch some PDFs of your invoices, just swap out the bank account so that next month you will receive it maybe 2 days earlier than normal. And if you pay it, it will actually go to the attackers because they just hijacked the account. So lots of things that can happen with email. Another thing that we saw, of course, now during the lockdown is many people have to work from home. I mean, me included, right? I'm at my home now, which means if I have to access some machines in my environment at the company, I probably need to do some VPN access, some remote desktop protocol, or I'm accessing those servers in the cloud, which means there's a lot more services which are now exposed. And we've seen, unfortunately, that Pulse VPN, Citrix, Microsoft DNS, they all had critical vulnerabilities in the past. So if you don't patch those quickly, it might be that someone can actually access those and then get access to your company or your machine at home, and from there hop on to other machines which might have interesting data. So make sure that those are always patched. We also saw that sometimes, well, just a denial of service attack might be good enough. If someone would start a denial of service attack against my home account now, I probably wouldn't be visible with my camera anymore. And fingers crossed that it's not going to happen, because it's very difficult to defend. I mean, yes, I could switch to 5G, but it's still cumbersome and kind of reduces my productivity. And make no mistake about it, of course, weak passwords are also freely available in the internet. You see there one news where 900 enterprise VPN servers had their password stolen and then kind of accessible for attackers, so they can just choose which organization they want to target and then go into it from there. Another point of those 5 attacks is, of course, since a lot of the companies could no longer go after their normal business process, many of them moved to the cloud, which is good because it's dynamic. You can easily create a new web shop and serve all your customers that couldn't come back to your shop, right? But many companies, specifically smaller, they don't really have the resources nor the knowledge to actually configure those services, think about the security from the beginning. So unfortunately, we have seen that many of those cloud services are up and running, but they're freely accessible for anyone from the internet, including write access from the attackers. I run about 100 Amazon S3 buckets. So those are those data buckets where you can upload any files, websites, or databases, and so on. And for my honeypot, I get about 6 attacks per day. So 6 times per day, someone tries to access my files because I made them readable for everyone. And we've seen that tons and tons happening again. So you see there's some news about 5 billion with a B of user records being accessible because someone did not pay attention to all the details. And that's not a mistake of Azure, Amazon, or Google. They actually warn you. But if you just click next, 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 you might misconfigure it and therefore leaving it open for the attackers. And the same happens, of course, with Kubernetes, Docker, serverless, like APIs. Everything that has been moved to the cloud needs to be protected as well. Otherwise, the attackers will find it. Well, the attackers are already there. We've seen that they sometimes spin up a new Docker container with some Monero cryptocurrency miner, and then it's running on your behalf, which means you pay the high bill for all the CPU power, and they get all the goodies of the money. Next one is, of course, those supply chain attacks. Like we mentioned SolarWinds, but there has been ACES, there has been MEDocs, which was misused by the NotPetya ransomware about 3-4 years ago. So it happens actually quite often. Not often is it that big as with SolarWinds, but we see that it's more and more common that the attackers try to go through an MSP, through a software component that you are using, and then just compromise them. And whenever you download the update, you will infect yourself or your company. And once they're inside, they will misuse all the tools which are already installed. So that's the classical living off the land techniques. So they might misuse classical tools like PowerShell or WMI, which are built-in tools from Microsoft on Windows components. Or they might use your software distribution package. They might misuse your backup to create a backup of all your juicy information, your crown jewel, and then store that backup on their own data center in the cloud, which means basically they're stealing all your data, but through systems that you have installed and that you are trusting. So make sure that it's not so easy for the attackers to misuse the applications, or at least that you get some warning if some unusual behavior happens, because otherwise you're just blindly trusting the trust. And yes, as we've seen with many, many cases, this can definitely backfire. And the last big case, of course, is targeted ransomware. Ransomware has been around since the 90s, but at that time it was a DOS virus encrypting your hard drive, and you had to send a check to Panama to get the decryption key. That was very complicated, didn't really work, and I mean, just mailing it there and then get the key, well, probably takes 2 weeks, right? Nobody wants to wait 2 weeks to get the data back, and nobody should wait, because that's why you have a backup and a disaster recovery plan to get back on. But unfortunately, the attackers know that as well, so they started now to steal the information. So we've seen that more than 25 different groups like Doppelpaymer, Klopp, Ryuk, Maze, and all those ransomware groups, they started stealing your information as well before encrypting it. So they can blackmail you and say, well, it's nice of you to have a backup, but if you don't pay, we're going to release this information and you might have to pay a privacy or a regulatory fee because of some privacy regulations like GDPR or California Privacy Act and so on. And this is just increasing. We also saw some like SunCrypt, which started to use a distributed denial of service attack against the victims just to put on enough pressure for them to actually pay. And yes, they of course try to delete the backups. They try to uninstall the security tools just to make it very, very difficult. And I have the daily detection numbers there for the last year, and you can definitely see it increased. We actually saw a 52% increase from the third quarter to the fourth quarter of last year because it's still very profitable. Some groups make more than $1 million profit per month. So why would they stop, right? They've been branching it out. So ransomware as a service is quite popular, as you can see here. So they are making a split. Even if you have no experience, you can just download it and attack other people and then get some cut of the shares. And of course, I'm not advising anyone to do it. It's illegal and definitely not morally fine to do, but some people might do it. So what's the normal attack chain that we see? Well, as I mentioned, it usually starts with an email. You activate it manually, or there could be an exploit, but usually it's a manual process. It will then start the macro in the background. It will run some scripts like PowerShell, which can send back information to the attacker and say, hey, there's some security tool here, I need to deinstall it, or hey, they don't have anything, but they have a water supply plant, so let's do something funny with that. Then they will download some payload, sometimes just in memory, to get the password. So that could be Mimikatz or any of those traditional tools to get the passwords, use those to jump to other machines inside your organization. And then once they're satisfied, they will steal the sensitive information and start the encryption process. And this can take 1 hour or it can take 3 months, depending on how, let's say, comfortable that they are that they will not be detected. And if you want to learn more, I suggest going to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is like a taxonomy of all those different techniques based on the different 12 levels of initial access, execution, exfiltration, and impact. So you can look how they are doing it, but of course, it's actually better to be prepared. So what do we see in the future? Well, we expect to see more of the same things happening because it can be automated with artificial intelligence. We will see more of those ransomware attacks where they steal your information before they encrypt it. We will see more attacks against the cloud because that's where all the information is going to, and the attackers are there already. We'll see more of those exploits against the trust in supply chain, being it through a service provider, being it through the cloud or anything like this. We'll see more of the attacks against exposed services, like your VPN servers, like your people at home using private laptops. And we will see that they actually know exactly what you're using. They know which custom software you might have been deployed, and then they try to misuse that to their advantage, which means to your disadvantage. And the last two to mention is, of course, we probably will see more of business process attacks as well. So that's meaning they might just try and go into the template of your invoices and change the bank account there so that next month, if you invoice your customers, well, they receive an invoice from you, but you will never receive the money because it goes somewhere else. So they will not use an exploit in the software, but just misuse some configuration. And yes, of course, IoT, the smart fridges and TVs and everything connected with 5G, that will definitely bring up a few new security angles as well. And we have already seen a casino, for example, getting compromised through a fish tank where the thermostat was actually attacked. So what can you do and what should you do? Well, you should definitely think about security from the start, meaning it has to be a part of your process when you begin with. So make sure that you revisit whatever you have done now, going to the cloud. Make sure that you check the configuration. If you're talking about the home, maybe check your router, your Wi-Fi settings, that they are really, really secure. And then you need some security software, ideally something which is automated across the different silos, because you don't really want to click through hundreds of alerts every day. And make sure that you protect the data, regardless of if it's a backup that you put on some USB drive at home, or if it's somewhere in the cloud on a Dropbox, because if it's not protected, someone will find it and will use it against you. And for that, you of course need to have visibility. So as a company, but also as an individual, you need to know where is your information, right? Privacy is big. Today is Safer Internet Day, but it actually should be, every day should be Safer Internet Day. Everyone should know about where the data is and how to protect it. And of course, that means on one end, you should do secure access with multi-factor authentication, with user entity behavior analytics, UBA, or of course, just some anti-phishing protection. And on the other hand, you need to be aware of those things. So make sure that you are cyber fit, and attending this seminar here hopefully is already a good first step to go towards knowing more about those threats. On the technology side, well, it has to be simple, consolidated into kind of one console ideally, because you don't really want to switch between 10 different products. It will get messy, it will get complicated. So you should have the big picture, the big overview, and it has to be efficient, right? Nobody has time, well, maybe apart from me, because it's my job, but nobody wants to take the time to go through 500,000 viruses that we see every day. 500,000 every day, and yes, you need to protect against them. And how you can do that? Well, let's hand over to JD, who will give you a brief overview of how Acronis does that with the Acronis Cyber Protect.
Thanks, Candid. So, yep, let's go ahead and jump into the Acronis Cyber Protect platform. So I want to start this with showing the idea of what we're building, right? The idea is we understand that you may have disparate solutions for patch management, for backup, for antivirus, for vulnerability assessments. That leaves a lot of vulnerability in your organization for misconfigurations, as Candid was just mentioning, right? You've got various different solutions that aren't talking to each other, that aren't unified, aren't being worked together. So the idea around Acronis Cyber Protect is we want to bring you all of those different disparate pieces into a single platform, single agent deployment that allows you to be not only proactive and active, but also be able to be reactive in case needed. Jumping forward, right? Lots of people may not have known this. A lot of people know Acronis from being backup and recovery. We're that imaging solution. But that's just simply not the case. Up to 4 years ago, we started with Acronis Active Protection that was included with our backup solution. It was a AI and ML enabled anti-ransomware, anti-cryptojacking technology that was just right there in that same agent. You can simply enable it, lock into it, and be able to protect while also being able to do those proactive backups of your systems. We've taken that momentum we've developed with Active Protection and we've built it out further. So that's where Cyber Protect comes in. So adding in our AI analyzers, our anti-malware engines, our behavioral engines, our capabilities of doing patch management and vulnerability assessments, on both live running systems as well as on backup files themselves, and giving you a complete solution that's again integrated in together with that single agent installation to give you the flexibility to prevent threats or vulnerabilities before they happen. So to jump into some of the product slides here, right? So starting with our anti-malware protection, right? That's the piece we started with 4 years ago with Active Protection that we've built up directly from there. It's a full stack anti-malware and antivirus capability built directly into that same agent that you're used to for our backup and recovery technology. It gives you both the real-time protection. It gives you the crypto mining protection on your devices, as Candid mentioned, someone dropping in a payload that's just using your resources and driving up those bills there. We've taken all of that and built it into that one individual agent platform that we have. Now we can do that scanning on demand and scheduled as you would typically expect here. But where we take it to the next level is when we build in our safe recovery piece. That allows us to do an automatic update of the anti-malware databases and definitions as we do a recovery of a system. It allows us to install those instant patches as part of our safe recovery to make sure that, hey, if I needed to restore an image for whatever reason, that we're back to that solid and secure state, that we're not artificially or injecting vulnerabilities into our systems by simply doing a recovery. And we can go beyond that, right? We have the capability of doing our scans, not only against your live running system, which may already have some resource contentions, but we can actually do those scans for antivirus or malware or logic bombs that may be sitting on a device somewhere. We can do those against the backups, reducing your resource overhead on your production workload. And then obviously being proactive, right? Same idea, same agent, same capability. We give you the capability of controlling your vulnerability assessments and patch managements all directly through the same console. So as part of that same protection plan where you're doing your backup and your antivirus piece, we can build in vulnerability assessments and automated patch management. So we can continually check and update our vulnerability database. So looking for those vulnerabilities and giving you the information about what vulnerabilities exist in the environment, and then automatically being able to do, patch deployment. So we can do it optionally as completely automated as you want, where we have an automatic approval of patches to be applied to the system, or as an administrator, you can go through and do your own approvals. Again, keeping it all consolidated into a single platform so you can confirm that your antivirus, your vulnerabilities, your patches are all being combined and controlled by that one single application and single place. Moving into, getting reactive. What happens if an attack does happen? Well, we do have the capability of taking a backup in what we call forensic mode. So what that allows us to do is we're capturing more than what your traditional backup would do. We're actually doing complete memory dumps. We're actually doing a sector by sector backup. So we're getting everything off of that machine that may be required for forensic investigation of a threat or an activity that may have happened in your environment, right? Again, nothing special that's needed to be done here. Our existing agent can go ahead and do this for you. It's hit a checkbox inside of the protection plan as you're creating your backup job out, and then it will capture all of that information there. This gives you, a lot of flexibility in being able to, have a complete system image that you can then use for different investigations, right? Whether it be for compliance purposes or other purposes as well. So the idea, right? Those are just a couple of the smaller or the bigger features that we have inside of the Cyber Protect platform, right? I'm barely scratching the surface here because we don't have enough time. We'd be here for 2 hours trying to go into everything that we can have. Again, the idea is we want to be able to take and handle any of these different data protections or protection scenarios that you may have, right? Whether it be patching and vulnerability, whether it be backup and disaster recovery, whether it be getting the machine back up and running in a timely manner, but making sure it's secure and locked down, preventing those attacks from happening before you even get to that page, right? That's the overall vision of the Acronis Cyber Protect platform, right? We want to give you that single agent, that single platform to be able to control and manage all of those different vulnerabilities that we have, that you may run into, across your production environment or out on the edge, as Candid mentioned, working from home. That opens up a wide array of attack vectors. Acronis Cyber Protection can actually jump in and help you handle those and mitigate those kind of risks. And we're actually pretty proud of what we've had here, right? Some of the technology that we've built, right? Again, we've been building on it for a number of years now. So we actually worked with VirusTotal, and they went through and did scans against cyber protection to see how fast we can react and how fast we can, get you back up and running after a different kind of attack like Ragnar Walker or Ryuk, right? And you can see that Acronis is hitting at 0 hours, right? You're effectively meaning you're not seeing downtime in these kind of scenarios. VirusTotal is just one example of what we have. We'll do a quick review now of what we have left on the agenda, and then we'll kick it back over to Candid to kind of talk about what other third parties are talking about here.
Perfect. Thank you, JD. And yes, you barely scratched the surface here, but I know it's a lot of stuff. Even I'm talking fast just to go through all the different things here, right? And yes, you mentioned kind of VirusTotal as one example, and people might be thinking, yes, okay, JD, he looks trustworthy, but I don't really know him, so can we really trust him? He has to say we're the best, right? And yes, I mean, I know you, I know you're trustworthy, but we have also tested the product in third-party testing organizations. So you see here on the middle side that, for example, AV Tests, which is a large testing institute in Germany, or AV Comparative in Austria, they take our product, they take Symantec, McAfee, and all the other brands, and then they run it against live malware, executing it to see kind of what is happening and who can protect against what. And as you can see, two examples there, the VB100 results, where we had 100% detection rate and 0 false positive in December, and for AV Tests, we had the same 100% detection rate and 0 false positives. And the 0 false positive actually is important. A false positive means that a product is detecting something that is actually benign and legitimate and thinks it is a virus. So in worst case, it means that it might be some Microsoft Windows application which you actually need, which is detected and then removed, and afterwards your system no longer boots because that was actually a crucial part. So having a low false positive rate is definitely important as well. Otherwise, you're just going to run back and forth verifying is that now a real threat or not. So I definitely recommend going through those different vendors if you don't trust us. We also have some partners who do their own test in-house. And as JD was saying, we might look like we're new to the security part, but we have been doing the anti-ransomware part for more than 4 years already. So we have the experience. It's just a lot of people don't really know about it. And of course, to bring the word out there, we are also talking with different partners, with different industry groups, and exchanging the information. One of those is the MVI, that's the Microsoft Virus Initiative. And yeah, I know the name is a bit kind of misleading. It's kind of the antivirus initiative because it's testing all the products that are installed as a security solutions on Windows, making sure that they behave normal, that they can actually do something, and also giving access to some sample sharing, to new research, and so on. We're also a proud member of the AMTSO, the Anti-Malware Testing Standard Organization, where we help to build fair tests. And fair means that malware is actually executed and kind of doing the behavior. As just having signatures is something, but a lot of those malwares, as I mentioned, 500,000 per day, well, they're just tweaking a little bit, but in core, they still want to do the same, right? They want to steal your passwords, your credit card, or encrypt your data if it's ransomware. So if you have something which is threat agnostic, but going after the behavior, you can actually ignore if they're wrapped in yellow or in green or blue. You're just interested in what they do in the core. And that's exactly kind of the testing methodology there. We're also part of the Anti-Phishing Working Group, Cloud Security Alliance, and so on. So we're definitely trying to kind of bring the word out there and help, because we think this cyber protection approach where we integrate the data protection, the cybersecurity, but also privacy, data availability, and authenticity, all those different domains into one site. Because as I mentioned, nowadays, you want to make sure that your data is secure regardless of if it's in the cloud, if it's on your laptop here, if it's just some neighbor kid who's trying to access it, or if it's some state-sponsored attacker from North Korea. In the end, you want to make sure that your data stays your data and you can access whenever you need it. But I know we have been talking quite a lot here, so I want to not miss the time, of course, to give some data back and hopefully some time back also for questions. And with that, let's move back to James.
Candid, thank you so much for that. JD is going to join us again. We've got a few questions queued up from the audience. But first, we're going to run a quick poll, basically talking about trying to get a sense of your direct experience with ransomware attacks. Are you completely unaware of it? Lucky you if that's the case. You've gotten evidence that you nearly got hit, but your user was canny enough not to click on suspicious email attachment. You had an attack, but you managed to contain it before it caused too much destruction. Did the attack succeed, but you managed to get your data back without paying the ransom? Again, lucky outcome if you manage that. Or did an attack succeed and you paid a ransom to recover? As Candid mentioned, this gets harder and harder as the months go by, and the attackers apply new techniques to get you to pay to get your decryption key and avoid further complications like having stolen data leaked or having a DDoS attack launched against you is another tactic we've seen. All right. So thank you for responding to that. Again, please continue to submit your questions through Q&A. Let me toss out one from the audience here, guys, that our Q&A guys did not get to. How can ransomware attacks affect resources stored in the cloud?
Well, we can take that. So yeah, as I mentioned, we see more and more data being moved to the cloud, right? There's some databases, could be Elasticsearch database, could just be some MongoDB in the cloud, serving some website or some other business application. And as I mentioned, if they're not secured properly, that means that someone might actually have access to it and not just read access, but write access. So we have seen that attackers are just encrypting the data in the cloud directly. And if it's a database, they just dump the whole database with all the information, and then they override it with a nice little message saying, hey, sorry about that. You'll have a bad day because your data is gone and you need to pay me a few Bitcoins. So they basically do the same that we've seen on-premise, but now because everyone's using the cloud, they moved to the cloud. So it can definitely affect your business. Sometimes if there is no data to kind of encrypt or do anything with it, well, they might just do changing of the passwords. So if they change all your access tokens to Amazon AWS, well, that's kind of a tough denial of service attacks, right? And till you figure out who to call to actually get your access back, you have some downtime. So those are exactly the attacks that we unfortunately see more and more often now, because yeah, everything is moving there. So you need to have your security and your cyber protection moving there as well.
Thank you for that, Candid. Another question here. Can you provide some more explanation and some color on living off the land attacks?
Sure. Since I mentioned it, I'll grab that as well. So living off the land means the attacker is abusing the tools which are already on your system. As I mentioned, for Microsoft, that's, for example, PowerShell. PowerShell is a scripting language which is installed on every Windows out there, at least, let's say, for the last 5 years. And attackers can misuse them. Of course, we also see a lot of benign and legitimate use of it. So system administrators are using it to change some profiles, do some checks in the background, remove software. But that's exactly what the attackers want to do. They want to blend in with the normal administrative work. So you might have, I don't know, 100 PowerShell scripts being executed by someone every month, and just one out of those is actually the malicious one. Do you really go through all the log files and check if this one behaves a little different than the others? Probably not. I mean, question is, do you log it at all, and do you actually know that's happening, right? So by using tools which are already on your system, they can blend in with kind of the normal kind of activity. And the second part is PowerShell itself is not malicious. PowerShell is not a virus, not a Trojan horse. It's just the way how it is used, right? So there is no malware sample on disk that you can remove. It's the command which is kind of the malicious part. You can think about the same that we have seen in real life as a ransomware attack, which used the WinZip, the tool for archiving your software. So they used WinZip with a password which was over 100 characters long. So pretty difficult to guess, as in no way to guess it. And then they started encrypting every file with WinZip. And then they deleted the original file. leaving you exactly with what ransomware wants. Every file is encrypted, and without that password, you won't get it back. The problem was they were using legitimate tools, so nothing you can basically click on and say, oh, this is Trojan Ryuk, and yes, of course, we detected, we have a signature, right? WinZip is not malicious. So they're moving kind of the burden up to you to detect suspicious behavior, things that shouldn't happen, and not just software which is not supposed to be there, but ways of the software, how it is used. So I hope that clarifies it. In total, of course, if you don't really want to be bothered with all the technical details, just get a good holistic security software who can handle those living off the land attacks, fileless attacks, and so on. Back to you.
Thank you again, Candid. We got another. This is a question I run into a lot of the webinars that I do as well. People keep telling us that if we just keep up with our patching and use strong passwords, we won't get attacked. Isn't everyone doing this already? Why aren't these two tactics enough these days?
Yeah, and I can take that one. So, and in a perfect world, everyone would be using patching and being up to date and using strong passwords, right? But we all know users. We all know we've all made mistakes. Those configurations can change, right? Someone is, if you put too complex of a password on somebody, they're going to end up with ABC 1, 2, 3, and then just keep incrementing the numbers, right? There's always going to be those vulnerabilities that are going to exist out there. The users are going to take the path of least resistance to make it so they can get their job done. So that's where, as much as we'd like to think that that's all being done, that's where the automation piece comes in, right? Being able to automate and force these kind of controls and protections, especially around the patch management and vulnerability assessment, right? Automatically being able to scan for those vulnerabilities and then patch them in real time without user interaction. That's really where the drive to that cat and mouse kind of comes in, right? Where we're trying to build a better solution so that you're not having to worry about those vulnerabilities or any of those threat vectors.
Great stuff, JD. Thanks. Here's an interesting one. I was fascinated by the topic of the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning in tech security. Aren't attackers also using the same tools that our vendors are using in terms of AI and ML? And don't they have the first mover advantage in the use of those tools? How are they going to help us?
You mean that classical cat and mouse game? I mean, yes, of course. Artificial intelligence, as in the technology, the methods, they are used on both sides, defending and offensive. And I mean, why shouldn't they, right? I mean, they of course are using it just to make it easier to kind of attack everyone that they can. And if they cannot do it on their own, they will try to do it and kind of automate everything from there. So we actually see that the attackers are already using automation and machine learning. In most cases, it's just for, let's say, generating spam messages. So they can go through all the social networks, find some interesting information, create automatically some phishing emails, send them, and then also check which one was successful, which one was not. And taking this, they will just take it back and say, okay, we need to tweak it a little bit here to then kind of improve their own success rate. And that's exactly what we're seeing, right? They are so successful that they need to branch out and kind of use, other people's resources, the ransomware as a service, to keep up with all those potential targets. So that's why we see 500,000 threats every day and so on. So if we move back to the defender side, well, we have been using artificial intelligence to defend for quite a few years already as well, to define what is normal behavior and find those outliers. Because artificial intelligence, machine learning is very good in finding specific things which don't really match into a huge data set of all those millions alerts that you might get. But make no mistakes, the artificial intelligence, I mean, we're not talking about Terminator, Skynet, kind of solving or hurting everyone in the end. There will still be the need for someone to actually look at the cases, but you can bring it down and automate 99% of all those background noise so that the administrator can actually focus on the real cases where they really need to dig deeper and go into it. So yes, it might look like a cat and mouse game at the moment, but I would say there is definitely on the defensive side the advantage that we can use it. We know kind of what should normal behavior look like. The problem usually is that people are not using it yet. They say, I'm not stupid. I never fall for those parcel delivery phishing emails, so why should I use some security software? And that's kind of the first mistake you do, because they, of course, might already have access to your machine because you might have chosen one of those simple passwords, as JD said. I hope that answers the question.
That's terrific, indeed. I know I personally get a shiver every time I see another YouTube video of Boston Robotics with their man-shaped and their dog-shaped robots doing dance routines. And I think we're getting a little closer to the Terminator Skynet singularity every day. Got another audience question here. Do you think money is better spent on user education versus advanced protection?
I can jump in on that one. And that's a very difficult question, right? Because it's a fine line. It's a double-edged sword, right? Because you could have the most educated users in the world and they could still have an attack vector. They could still be an attack vector, right? So you've got to find that fine line to walk between educating users and, advanced protections. Because even if you have the most educated user, they don't click suspicious links, it could be something as simple as their wife used a USB drive and now they took it into work, and that's an attack vector because maybe their wife or their children didn't understand what they were doing, right? And infected a USB drive, and that becomes a very simple attack vector. So you almost need to have both. It's very difficult, and it's a fine line as far as budgets have to go, as far as where you need to spend that money. And that's why, exploring the different options that are out there, right? Looking at the different protection pathways you could go down, as well as making sure that you're continuing to do internal education, right? Because that's a very simple way an admin can help is, regular tests, internal tests, regular, webinars internally to say, hey, this is, you need to look for suspicious, how to isolate, is this a good email address, right? Because if we've all have iPhones, the mail app on there doesn't even show the true email address unless you click to respond to it. So simple things like that is an easy, free way of educating your user and allowing you to have budget to spend on, a true advanced protection process.
Yeah, I like that approach. And as you say, it kind of has to be the balance, as in you need both, right? Because in the end, there are some phishing attacks which are so good that if you're under stress and you just think, oh yeah, I'm actually waiting for kind of this invoice or this parcel delivery or something, you might not think and just click through. So sometimes you need the technology, but if you can already have it through the classical cyberthreat awareness, you can already remove most of it so that you don't have to deal with hundreds of attacks every day that are successful.
Thanks, guys. I guess I'll bring up the other example of the executive whose time is too valuable. They're too busy to have to deal with security measures like, let's say, multi-factor authentication. And just remind our audience that you got to get those folks on board as well, because they've got a big target on their backs. Whale phishing and just in general, targeted attacks that go after the folks that have the power to move money. Those sort of things are very real. So you can't let those people cow you with their "I'm too busy for cybersecurity" stories. I think we got time for one last question here. Where is the study showing Acronis detected 100%? And is this known threats or known and zero-day threats?
I guess I'll take that since it was on my slide. So there are a few, probably most known, the Virus Bulletin VB100 awards. So you just search for VB100. There's plenty of other vendors being tested as well among Acronis. And the other one was AV Comparative or AV Test, where our products are all tested. the tests come out in kind of irregular sequences. So you might not have one for January with us, but just scroll down and you should find one. In terms of known threats or unknown threats, it is kind of a mixture. So they do check with prevalent sets, so malware which has been active for the last 1 month or 2 months, but they also use zero-day threats, not a fan of the term, but as in new malware, which they just received in their own spam trap, which has not been seen anywhere, which is not yet on VirusTotal, and then they test the product against it, just to ensure that there is not yet a signatures on the hash on it, but it actually has to really work with the pre-execution AI model or the behavior-based detection and so on. So it is as close as it gets to real-life testing. And again, that's what we vote for as well in the Anti-malware Testing Standard Organization, AMTSO, to push real-world tests, because that's what the customer wants, right? They want as close to the real-life experience to know, can Acronis protect you, yes or no? And of course, as JD will hopefully agree, the answer is yes.
All right, Candid, JD, thank you again so much for a very rich and chewy set of presentations. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up today. I also wanted to say thank you to Daniel and Derek for managing the Q&A while our main guys were on stage presenting. With that, I just want to take you through a couple of resources that we have to share with you. There we go. So if we always say the best way to be convinced of the sort of the simplicity and power of our interface is to download a free trial. So if you're a business, there's one link there. If you're a managed service provider, there's another one, 2 different versions of the product. Also, happy to, there's folks standing by, happy to talk to you about buying the product or finding a partner that you can start a discussion with, including a direct number you can contact us in America. Also, a few resources here. We've got many more in the Acronis Resource Center. There's a few here that we wanted to highlight. The Acronis Cyber Readiness Report, which surveyed something like upwards of 10,000 of your peers to find out what issues they were worried about and how we can deal with that. The SMB Cyber Threat Landscape Report. And again, we've got many others of these on the Acronis Resource Center. Also encourage you to check out the Acronis blog for more timely treatments of newsworthy topics in data protection and cybersecurity. With that, I will say thank you to our audience and say don't go away just yet. I'm gonna hand you back to Charlene in just a second after a quick word about the Acronis Cyber Foundation. If you've got the means and are so inclined, please make a donation to this. This is our nonprofit charity that builds schools and offers computer training in emerging economies around the world, including with the help of Acronis employees who take time off to help build those schools. Worthy cause. We hope you can support it. With that, I'll say thanks again, everybody, and back to you, Charlene, for some closing words, including some prize awards. Thanks so much.
Great. Great. Thanks. Thank you, James. Can you hear me okay? Just want to be sure.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. Yes, a quick reminder that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we are going to be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the Security Boulevard website. So you can always go look for it there. Just go to securityboulevard.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Okay, real quick, I did mention at the top of the hour, we would be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's see, our winners today are Julie H. Congratulations, Julie. Our second winner today is Kayla T. Congratulations, Kayla. Third winner today is Joe G. Congratulations, Joe. And our final winner today is Mercy D. Congratulations, Mercy. We'll be following up with all 4 of you via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. If you don't see it there, please check your spam folder. So so much good information in today's webinar. I was so thrilled with the entire event and all of the information it provided. So thank you to James, Candid, and John for a great webinar. As always, you guys just hit it right out of the park. I appreciate that. And judging from the questions that came in, I know the audience got a lot out of it too. But I do want to thank you guys for joining me today. I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.